Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire's Business of America podcast with your host, Jerry Rogers.
Well, welcome back to the Business of America with yours truly, Jerry Rogers. I'm also the host of Real Clear Policy, Real Clear Health. I am a political junkie, a policy junkie. Ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to be in politics. And so today's show is very special because if you're like me, I'm constantly looking for ballot questions and candidate surveys and what position this candidate has and what's trending. And our guest today is the founder, the publisher of Ballotpedia, Leslie Graves. Leslie, welcome to the Business of America.
Thanks for inviting me, and Happy New Year.
Well, Happy New Year. That's right. It's 2024.
Yeah.
My youngest today was off to school, and I had to sign some test scores or something, and I put 2023, and he was like, "Dad, it's 2024." So 2024, it's going to be a huge year for Ballotpedia. Yeah. So let me start if you don't mind, the beginning. Sure. When did it start? When did it launch? Why? Why did you do it? And then from there we'll have a conversation.
Well, although I live in Wisconsin, which does not have the ballot initiative process, and that's the process where people can collect signatures to refer a question to the ballot for the state's voters to vote on. I've always loved that process. About 24 states have it and been fascinated by it. And so when we started Ballotpedia in 2007, the only reason for its existence was to write encyclopedic one-stop shopping articles about all of the country's ballot initiatives. There are about 200 of them every 2 years. And that was really all that we wanted to do. Why did we want to do that? It was because they're kind of complicated. There are 20 or 25 different pieces that you need to weave together for people to really understand what that ballot measure is all about. And it wasn't a desirable state of the internet for people to have to go here and go over here to find out who gave them money, go over here to find out how many signatures they needed, go here to find the actual text that you'd be voting on, and all the other many things. So the idea was really just to put it all in one place, to make it easy for people, and to do that in a neutral way so they could feel really confident about the information they were getting.
You know, that's interesting because one of the big issues now, of course, is misinformation and social media and deep fakes and these sorts of things. So again, I make my living in politics. It's important to get things right. You know, I'm very careful on social media. I will not forward something, repost something, unless I know the person or the group that's putting out the information. But Ballotpedia is helpful here because if I want right information, if I want to know in an unbiased way too, because our media really has begun to, if I want to hear right stuff, I go there. If I want to hear left stuff, I go there. It is important to have a place where you know that it's an honest actor. And Ballotpedia has been, continues to be that honest actor. But speak to that, the importance of clarity and right information in terms of our elections.
Yeah. You know, oftentimes when people talk about biased media, what they mean is that when an article that may be somewhat biased is biased, what they mean is that it only presents certain arguments, like maybe the right-wing arguments on that issue or the left-wing arguments, and it gives short shrift to the other side. That's usually what they mean. When Ballotpedia staffers look at articles, we aren't necessarily thinking about it through that lens. We're like, they left out half the facts that you would have to know to actually understand this. And like a common thing that our staffers will learn is there might be an article about a lawsuit against a ballot measure to have it removed from the ballot because the ballot title is wrong or something like that. There's lots of lawsuits against ballot measures. You can read that whole article, and at no point, generally speaking, will it tell you the name of the lawsuit or who filed it. So that makes it really hard to go do deeper research on it. And that's just one example of many. So we're not trying to write articles that fully represent both sides of the issues, although when it's appropriate, we absolutely do that. So for example, if it's a ballot measure, 168, here are the arguments that people are making for this, and here are the arguments that people are making against it. And we do that in a very unbalanced way. Usually the issue is really just what are all the facts, and making sure that those are all in one place. And that is what we really focus on. It's quite hard.
It is, and we give short shrift to it in the sense that, Joe Friday, only the facts. But we're getting to a point in our public discourse where the facts almost don't matter. What matters is the narrative. What matters is the headline. Very often, I'll read a headline, but then read the article, and the article and the headline don't match. But it's a lot of clickbait and this sort of thing. And again, it's important to have these safe places to go to for right information, for facts. Let me ask you this, because the model of the show, the mission of the show was to invite executives and experts and physicians and scientists and others on, folks who Teddy Roosevelt would say are in the arena. It's easy to criticize. It's easy to say you're doing it wrong, I can do it better, but you're not in the arena. You're in the arena. You created something that maybe existed in parts, but not in whole. But even more importantly, it has evolved since 2007. How has Ballotpedia evolved over the years?
Sure. By the way, when we were a year into our experiment in covering ballot measures, we were only really trying to make beautiful articles for people. We had no idea how many people would want to read those beautiful articles. For all I knew, 10 was the number. But nobody had ever heard of Ballotpedia. But what we learned that first year is that search engines tend to elevate our articles pretty high up in search results because the search algorithms can see that this article is chock full of a bunch of facts about the thing. And so we found in our first a year out there that the number of people who were looking for information through their search bar, whatever the search engine was, usually it was Google, was quite high. And then they would find their way to our articles. And that's really how we found our audience. It was people who were Googling for factual information. And we also found out there's a lot of them. So we've never been in despair about the American voting public because we see through our traffic every year just how hard they are working to get out there and find information. In other words, they're not just looking in their typical left-wing echo chamber or their typical right-wing echo chamber. They're going to their search engine and you're like, I'm going to do some independent searching and find what I can about this. And there's a ton of that information, a ton of that activity going on. I find that very inspiring. These are people doing their homework. Then I thought, well, if there are that many people who want to know about ballot measures, statewide ballot measures, are there people who want to know about local ballot measures? Are there people who want to know about state Supreme Court justices? Are there people who want to know about state senators and the other down ballot things? And over the years, we gradually added more and more pieces of information or content areas. So now we have 425,000 articles, and we cover all, from presidency down to very local issues. But we still have a long way to go to build out the bottom of the ballot because there are 500,000 local elected officers in the United States, and we're only covering about 50,000 of them. So we have 450,000 more to go.
Well, let me ask you this, because I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're going to cover some school board races and 10 states specifically. Can you talk a little bit about, because that's down ballot.
That's very down ballot, yeah.
Although it's gotten a lot of news lately, but regardless, what do you do with school board races?
Yeah, first of all, across the country, there are 13,500 school districts. So their boundaries are very higgledy-piggledy. There are 83,000 elected school board members. So that's a big job. So in 2023, we experimented with covering all school board elections in 10 states. Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Colorado, and 7 other states, because we just wanted to see if we could do it. The biggest in our great country, which enshrines federalism as one of our basic governing precepts, one of the things that means is that a lot of things are handled at the local level. And one thing, of course, that's handled at the local level is the administration of elections. So the way that the people in this county might administer their elections might be very different from the way that the people one county over manage it. And that really affects voters, because the way that they display the information on their website about who's on the ballot, when the election is, how soon before the election they put that information on their county website, varies dramatically all over the country. So for us, when we set out to cover all the school board elections in 10 states, we knew the biggest challenge would literally just be getting the accurate list of candidates in all of those school districts. And it was challenging, but we figured out how to do it now on an automated basis. So that's great. And then the next thing we wanted to do is that if you're going to go vote, and you, we've all had this experience, you walk into the voting booth and you know who the people are up here, right? You've heard of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, heard of them, so you know what you're going to do there. U.S. Senate, you've heard of them. A lot of people, when they get down to U.S. House, they're like, huh. Or they know governor, get down to state attorney general, state treasurer, gets a little foggier.
Sure.
But for most people, when you get down to city council and school board and whatnot, they're like, got nothing for you here. So we're trying to solve that problem for people, but it doesn't solve the problem for people if we make it easy for them to discover a month before the election the names of the people who are running for school board. Just knowing the names isn't enough. You also need robust information about those people, so they can see, oh, this is the one that I agree with, this one I do not agree with. So we have a number of ways we're working on that, and one of the ways is through doing a candidate survey that all candidates at all levels can fill out, and we're getting a lot of those returned, but not nearly as many as we need to really solve the problem for our readers. And the other way we're trying to do it is collect information about local endorsing organizations and who they supported in that race. So, for example,
the League of Conservation Voters, or whatever the group is. Sure,
right. And first, go ahead.
That's very interesting, because I know that there are times when I take voting very seriously. In fact, it's almost like a holiday in our house, where even when my little ones grew and were able to vote, it was I couldn't wait to take my oldest daughter to go vote. And it's a celebratory mood in our house. But however, like you said, sometimes even in our information age, it's difficult to get information on a candidate. However, what's important, and you just mentioned this, and that is I do look who has endorsed the candidate.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so that's important.
Right. So, for example, for school board, just to randomly pick this up, if you have a contest and this candidate was endorsed by Moms for Liberty, and this candidate was endorsed by the local teachers union, whatever your predispositions are, that endorsement will make it pretty clear to you which way you want to go. So so we need to go find that information and import it back into our pages. So it's a big scaling issue for us. But in those, one thing that we found that was fascinating, we think this is a little known area of American politics that we like. Across these 10 states where we covered all the school board elections, we discovered over 1,800 local endorsing organizations. Wow. So there aren't just the big ones that everybody's heard of, the National Rifle Association or Planned Parenthood or whatever. There's a whole big ecosystem of really interesting little local groups that take as their responsibility to maybe endorse in 10 judicial contests, local judicial contests, or 18 school board races. So that was really interesting.
We have business executives and those who comment on the business environment on our program. Often it's the business of America, and what I find out in talking to them is these local elections, especially school board, for instance, in a state like New Jersey, the property tax issue is a big issue, and it's driven by the school budgets. Right, a lot of the public education funding comes from property taxes. And so if you're a family thinking about moving to one municipality or another, in say New Jersey, or you're a business person looking to start a mom and pop shop or something, the property tax issue is big. And like you just said, but there are local chambers, local business organizations or environmental organizations that will endorse. And again, I had a boss once, Fred Smith from the Competitive Enterprise Institute.
Oh,
and he
sure.
said, and Fred said once, or said often, he said, in politics, people are stupid because they're smart. And what he meant by that was they focus on the things where they can have some kind of effect, some kind of change. So you watch your kids and their schoolwork and this sort of thing. But I find that these especially on the local level, these small groups, C.S. Lewis called them little platoons. The little platoons that work for mercy and justice and community, and those are the ones where if you can't get the information on a candidate that you feel secure in making a vote, these little platoons are important. And again, you think of politics, and you said this, and I chuckled, but it's true. Like you look on, I know this guy Trump, I know this guy Joe Biden, and I might know my senator and my congressperson, but when you get into the state senate, when you get into the assembly races, the local council races, but I'm going to ask you this: a very difficult issue for some are judges, and because hopefully a good judge you don't hear much about. And so therefore, I have to do a lot. When I vote, it's the judges that give me the most trouble. How do you deal with that with judicial elections?
Yeah, so just very basically, you've got your federal judges. Those are nominated by the president. We're not going to talk about them. We're going to just talk about state court judges.
Yes.
So at the state court level, you have your trial judges, and then your appellate judges, the state Supreme Court or the intermediate appellate judge, where you can appeal the decisions of the local judges. Now, those local judges are one of the least understood pieces of the American political landscape, and they're across the 50 states. There are about 32,000 of them. They have very little competition on the ballot. So, like, for example, with those school boards that we covered last year, there were 8,800 races we were covering, and 60% of them had no contest. So only 40% of them was it contested. So that was interesting. Right. Well, it's worse I don't know if worse is the right word, but when it comes to the local state court judges, they have very little competition on the ballot. And furthermore, also people don't know very much about them. And even if they did know a lot about them, I think that people don't necessarily, you might feel qualified to vote for a political candidate, a state legislator, because you know that their position on rent control lines up with your position on rent control. It's not the same when you vote for a judge. You're voting for more abstract qualities like fairness, judicial temperament, things like that. And people we have found, feel more nervous about voting for judges because they don't feel qualified. But we encourage people to the way that the states were designed. You're being asked to vote on these judges because people think that you can figure out which judges to vote for, and you can if you have enough information. We also are finding increasingly that judges are filling out our candidate survey. When we started, we weren't sure they would do that, but they do. So that's great.
So let me ask you this, because there are trending issues. We're talking about local issues now, but let's go to the top of the ticket. What are, in 2024, the new year? I'm excited for 2024 because, again, I'm a political junkie. I'm looking forward to the November elections. I'm looking forward to, people say, well, if there, we might have 2 independent candidates running and the major parties and maybe no labels. It could be thrown to the House. I mean, but for me, this is going to be like Shakespeare theater. It's going to be wonderful. However, issues still matter. And like you said, facts matter. And so what's trending? What what are going to be the big issues given what you're noticing from the candidate surveys or from ballot initiatives? What are the emerging issues in 2024 for the election?
Yeah, I mean, on a statewide and a federal level, the two big issues are going to be immigration and abortion. It would appear to me to be the case. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be emotionally.
Well, I'm shocked because I've heard nothing about these issues over the.
I mean, there are issues that the highly politically engaged among us are deeply fascinated by, both on the left and the right, super interested in how elections are conducted.
Yes.
And other sort of inside baseball things like that. It's very hard to get the average voter, and I speak of the average voter with great love. They're not going to be voting on issues like that. Not very many of them are. They will be voting on things like, are the academic outcomes in my school district for my kids or my grandchildren getting worse or better? How's that going? What's the condition of the economy? What's going on with immigration? And what am I going to do about abortion? Those are really going to be the big issues.
I remember when I was younger, I had great respect for and admiration for Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Mm-hmm. He was an Irish guy from Hell's Kitchen in New York. I'm originally from the Bronx. So he was an Irish kid who did well, who did really well. But I remember he was on Meet the Press, mm-hmm. And he and I think it was Phil Gramm, Democrat. Moynihan was a Democrat, of course, New York. Phil Gramm was a Texas senator, Republican, and they were talking about public education. And there was an expert on with them, an expert in education. And they were arguing about more federal control, local control. Mm-hmm. And the expert was arguing for a more robust federal involvement in local education. And it was a very interesting conversation. But this is what struck me, even all these years later. They were talking about, and I think it was Senator Graham. He was somewhat curt, and he said something like, "Well, you think you know better than the parents," and the expert had a weak moment and said, "Well, yes, I do." I don't think the expert meant that, but mm-hmm. they were in the midst of this argument, and Phil Gramm shot back and said, "Well, what are their names? What are my kids' names? If you know better." But what struck me about that was the importance of parents and what issues, or business people, or what turns them. Mm-hmm. You might see Republicans not voting for a Republican candidate because of a local property tax issue or a business issue or a regulatory issue or vice versa, or a Democrat who you think, well, this person, of course, is going to vote for this. But no, because they own a diner and there's a zoning issue going on. My point is that and I like what you said. The American vote is more complicated than just left and right, Republican, Democrat. There are nuances, and I also think that there's this emerging kind of like working class Main Street issues versus Wall Street issues. Like right now, the economy is obviously going to be a big mm-hmm. issue, and there are signs the economy is improving. There are also signs that the economy is leaving some behind. And so, but where do you get your information on the economy? Are you more of a Main Street guy or Wall Street guy? Both are important. We need Main Street, but we also need, for 401k and such things, we need a Wall Street. How does Ballotpedia kind of help us get through all of these nuanced issues? I mean, what do you decide up front? In other words, what do you decide when I go? Like, what do you think should be the headlines on over at Ballotpedia in terms of the issues?
Sure.
I know you said abortion and immigration, but I mean,
our approach to the policies that we cover is a little bit idiosyncratic. I'm just going to take a minute to explain it.
Yes, I love this stuff.
I don't think there's nothing that Ballotpedia can say to the reading public at any level about abortion that they haven't already heard. That any thoughts anybody might want to have about abortion have already been thought and said repeatedly, and will continue to be thought and said. Everybody understands there's two sides to the issue. They would easily be able to go and read about this side and that side. We just don't think we can contribute to that, and that's true for some other issues as well. But there are smaller issues where we can contribute to it because people don't know too much about the issues, so they're looking for that overview that really explains to them what the whole situation is. And some of the articles that we write like that, or sections of articles or sets of articles, are like on ranked choice voting.
Yes, my goodness.
Hot
topic.
Which is going to be on a bunch of statewide ballot measures in 2024, and many people, even people who are really, really politically clued in and they've heard the phrase ranked choice voting at a cocktail party, if you said, "Can you define that?" to them, they would be like, not really. So that's where we can perform a great service to people, is to have okay, here's what it is, bada bing, bada boom, and put it out there in a very comprehensive and neutral way. We also do that for, really niche topics like environmental, social, and governmental investing, ESG investing. We do it for
ESG, yes.
many topics related to the administrative state. So we look for issues that people don't already know everything about, where they kind of want a comprehensive overview to write about.
Now, this is fantastic. Let me ask you this then. Your audience, who is your audience?
Yeah, so during the year we have sort of a steady audience all year long with spikes for the primaries. But when you get to mid-September, the traffic line starts going like this. On Monday, on Monday, the day before the election, it goes very, very high, and it doesn't go down until Wednesday at noon. So those people that come in that last 72 hours of the election are a different part of our audience than the people who are absorbing our information the whole rest of the time. And they are people who, political science studies will show you this, are people, they vote, but their preference is to spend less than 10 minutes a week reading or thinking about politics. So they're going to vote. Really? But do not be telling me all your stuff the rest of the time. So they're not like you and me. So they are the people who come in that last week, especially those last few days. They're going to vote. They're going to do their civic duty. They want to get the down low. And so that's our audience then. The rest of the time, it's more people like you who want to read. There's more I can read about politics, the happier I am. Yeah.
It's funny that you said that about folks who come in late. Don't want to spend lots of time. They want the information though. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on your site. Mm-hmm. And again, I mentioned it already, but Fred Smith used to talk about value voters, not value voters like social issues. That we all have a certain kind of value system. Some of us are it's about fairness, and so I'm a fairness voter, or it's about justice, and very often. You would think someone who didn't spend lots of time in politics wouldn't know how to vote, but that's not true. If they get some information and that information matches with or gels with their value system, then they have a pretty good idea of how to vote. And I do think that, because I'm on your site all the time, I do think that even if I was I was a school teacher. And I coach, and I have 4 kids, and I'm balancing budgets and shopping and groceries. I'm pretty confident that I would have a certain value system, and I could go to your site in the last 72 hours and be an informed voter. I think that's, at the end of the day, what you're helping to create is a public discourse where and not all voters can spend the same amount of time. I make a living here, so of course I know more. But the fact of the matter is, what you're providing is information, honest information, to make our public discourse better. I tell my kids all the time, I love to argue, but argue in the old sense of let's you have your position, I have my position. Let's be civil, but let's be heated and let's have a conversation. I think we're afraid of those conversations now. But I think if more of us went to Ballotpedia and just became somewhat informed and pick these issues, how they gelled with our values, we could have more informed conversations.
Yeah, I trust people who make last minute snap decisions, and they trust themselves. That's why they're willing to do that. It's just like making a hotel reservation at the very last minute. Some people are willing to do that, and some people aren't. I do think that there is a thing that last minute snap decision voters have, which is they sort of have a factor when they evaluate a situation. They're like, oh, come on. They have a common sense nature to them where they're like, please. On either side, whichever side they end up on, they're like, you've got to be kidding me. Yeah.
We don't work blue on this show, but some people would say they have a BS detector.
I think that people who make snap judgments do probably have pretty good.
Yes.
The reason I say that is that I think people who are very immersed in the world of politics tend to look down at that segment of people who only make up their mind at the last minute, and they're like, how could it not be very obvious to these people that they should read about politics 20 hours a day and that this side is right? Why aren't they like me? And to think that there's something detached or that they're neglecting their civic duty. I don't know. I kind of love them.
You know what? And I this is so much fun. I agree with you. If you notice, the people you're talking about, they can go to a ball game, or to their kid's soccer game, or go to a cafe or to an art museum, and not care about whether the person next to them is a Biden voter or a Trump voter. And I find that those who are in like the DC crowd, I'm in DC, they do care, and they self segregate. I can't be friends with him. He voted for Donald Trump, or I can't vote for him. He voted for Joe Biden. But regular people don't think that way.
Which, thank goodness.
Oh yeah. I know. I'm agreeing with you, but I also think that what Ballotpedia does kind of protects that. That folks can go and get information and be who they are and be friends with who they want to be friends with and go make right choices and make informed choices. Yeah,
the word safe space, of course, is overused and people have different connotations for it. But at Ballotpedia, our staff we're trying to build a safe space so people can come in there, be quite sure no one's going to put a thumb on the scale, and give them the information that they need. It's quiet, it's calm. Get what you need, go about the rest of your day.
I like it. It's how I shop for Christmas. I know what I want, I go get it, and I leave.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one final question,
Sure.
and that is, and I'm a despairing optimist. I have great hope for the future. I truly do. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't have hope. But there are times when I'm like, oh my goodness, 2024, the elections, we hear all this, we hear a lot of there's going to be strife and there's going to be this or that. Are you hopeful for the future, for the near future? Are you, gauge for me, because you seem so reasonable, and I think you think very similar to me, which is very exciting. I don't meet a lot of people who think like me. I'm curious. I'm really curious about what you're thinking about near term, long term for our national discourse.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about that is that the elite on the left and the elite on the right clearly each side has gotten itself wee-weed up. Great phrase that Barack Obama used.
I love it.
To a point of catastrophizing.
Yes.
Both sides are, the elite, highly convinced that catastrophe will ensue if the wrong person gets elected. This is true. It's true that they are very,
we better
very
go buy canned goods and water, right?
So, but I just want to say that just because they are convinced the catastrophe will ensue doesn't mean that it will. They just have gotten themselves all wrapped up around that idea.
All right. Well, listen, I could talk to you for hours. Maybe you'll consider coming back as we get closer to the election.
Sure,
and maybe even do a post-election. And because there are things that we could still discuss, but I value your time, and this has been wonderful.
Thanks.
I hope you join us again. This has been Jerry Rogers, my guest Leslie Graves, Ballotpedia. this has been one of my most fun conversations. And
thanks.
So thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
This has been the Federal Newswire's Business of America podcast, hosted by Jerry Rogers. Check out the Federal Newswire's family of websites, as well as their social media stream